Hi, and welcome. So we're going to talk about personal statements. I want to get creative with y'all for a little bit, and I feel like if you focus in into these exercises, you should have at least a couple ideas about, what your personal statement topic might be. And we're going to look at a couple examples. Let me just give you the quick recap of what we're going to be doing. So I'm going to spend just a minute talking about what the purpose of the personal statement is. Then I'll do an intro, who I am and how those things are related. I'm going to take you through 3 short exercises that are going to help you think about possible ideas. Then we're going to go into what does a great personal statement look like some example essays. And then I'm going to share with you 4 qualities of what I believe go into a great personal statement. And I'll probably try not to say personal statement 100 times in this session. And then I'm going to give just like a 1-minute PSA on a Pay What You Can course that I have coming up next month, actually in a couple weeks. And then we'll do Q&A. So my brother Devin, who's moderating, is going to be turning off the chat because otherwise it just looks crazy and you're just kind of like, oh, what is that awesome thing? And then we'll turn it back on in about 40 minutes. So let's get creative together. So my name's Ethan. I spend 8-10 hours a day thinking about college essays. It wasn't my plan in life. I went to Northwestern, studied theater, wanted to be an actor, wanted to be a writer. I still kind of am a writer, but really I see myself as a teacher. I've spent the last 12 years, I guess, 12 to 15, depending on how you count it, thinking about this work. Got a couple of counseling certificates. This is what I do. This is what I do. So if you need help with this, I'm the right person for you. And it brings together a lot of my core values in terms of efficiency, in terms of practicality, in terms of digging deep, in terms of personal growth. I could go on and on about that. But the purpose of the personal statement, just to get right into it, is to demonstrate to colleges what are the values, the skills, the qualities, the superpowers in some cases that you're going to be bringing with you to the college campus. And the question before us is, okay, how do I, 1, figure out what some of those things are, and 2, how do I find out a structure that's going to help, communicate those things in a way that's cohesive, in a way that really makes sense. So that's what we're about this morning. So I want to start with a really simple exercise it's simple, but it's pretty powerful, and it's at the root of pretty much all the work that I do. So I'm going to share my screen here for a second. And when I share my screen, you're going to see this list, and I apologize if the writing is too small, but don't worry, I'll send this out to you later so you can kind of see what is the what. So this is what I call a values exercise. So take a look at this. Here's a big list of values. I'm going to zoom in on it just a little bit. Now, I want you to take a look at this list for a second, and I want you to see if you can identify your top 10 values. And I'm going to give you just 2 minutes to do this. But take a look at this list and pick 10 values, the 10 that you feel like are the most salient or most meaningful to you today. And I'll scroll up and down on this list because there are some extras. If there's some that aren't on this list, you want to add them in, that's fine too. So actually do this. If you don't do this, it's going to be kind of boring, this part. And it's going to connect to the other exercises we do. So humor me and know that you could find your personal statement topic in the next 10 minutes. What are your top 10 values? I'll just keep kind of scrolling up and down on these because it's hard to fit them all in one. You got about 30 seconds more. See if you can find 10 of these. And again, you can do some write-in votes here if you want. If your values are not on the ballot here, you can write in Kanye West. I'm not saying Kanye West is a value. It might have been for me at one point. I was that into college dropout. But what are some values that are important to you? Okay, now take your top 10. I want you to whittle it down to top 5. So of the values you've listed, you've got 30 seconds. I want you to list your top 5 values. All right, and now that you've got your 5 or maybe close to 5, I want you to list your top 3 values. It's probably getting harder. What of the 5 would you say are your top 3? And then you know what I'm going to say next. What's your number 1 value if you had to list it? All right. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for just a minute. So the question of your personal statement is, how do you then manifest these values through not just your personal statement, but also through your whole application? And there are a couple different ways of doing this. And I'm going to take you through 2 more exercises that'll get you started. I've got some others, but today we've got time for 2. So this is going to seem like an unrelated exercise, but it's probably not unrelated. So I'm going to set a timer. I'm going to grab my timer real quick. All right. So I've got my phone. I'm going to set a timer for just 1 minute. Let's see. All right. So I'm going to set my timer for 1 minute, and I want you to make a list of all the things that you love. Now, wait, what does that look like? All right, let me give you that example. So let's see. It's something like this. So my name's Ethan, and I love smoothies. I have a smoothie here. I love the color blue of this bottle. I love pens that write really well. I love meditation when I make time for it. I love reading to my daughter. I love, you kind of see what I'm doing here? Okay, so that's what I want you to do for a minute. I want you to just make a list of things you love. You can either write it or you can type, okay? So for 1 minute, I want you to just make a list of things you love. Don't think about it too much, just free flow. This is just a brainstorm, free flow, stream of consciousness exercise, all right? You don't have to do this in the chat box. You can do this on your own because you're gonna want to keep these. What do you love? 3, 2, 1, go. You got about 30 seconds left. If you just joined us and you're wondering why I'm being silent, it's because we're making a list of all the things we love, or as many as we can think of in 1 minute. All right, time's up. All right, next exercise. This one's called I Know. So what are some things that you know a lot about? I know a lot about voices. I know a lot about the International Phonetic Alphabet. I know a lot about games. I know a lot about bringing people together. I know a lot about facilitation. I know a lot about college essays. Anyway, you get the idea. Okay, so for a minute, I'm going to set my timer again, and I want you to make a list of things that you know a lot about. Or if that feels like too far, too much to say, just what are some things you know about? Okay, what are some things you geek out on? 3, 2, 1, go. Keep going. What are some other things you know a lot about? All right, time's up. All right, one more exercise, and then I'll tell you what all this has to do with finding a personal statement topic. So I want you to consider, this is called the essence objects exercise, and I'm only going to do like a 2-minute version of it. But I want you to consider that there are these important moments, memories, relationships that you have, and I want you to see if you can express them in terms of what are some of the important essence objects in your life. So what's an essence object? An essence object is something like this friendship bracelet that I have around my wrist, which to me connects to my wife. She gave it to me. She gives me a friendship bracelet for my birthday every year, and my birthday's coming up in 2 weeks, so she's going to be making a new one soon, I imagine. And this one's going to wear off soon, I know, because it does every year. And she remakes one for me, and to me that kind of represents her love for me, but also like our connection. She's also my best friend. I also have another thing here on my desk, which is like some beads that my community painted for my daughter when she was born, when she was coming into this world. And so that represents, they don't all have to be bracelets or beads, represents my community's connection with and love for my daughter, even before she was born. I would put a pen in there because I consider myself a writer. I would put barbecue sauce in there because I just love barbecue sauce and it reminds me of my grandmother. So what are some of your essence objects? You kind of get the idea. Let's just spend a minute or two seeing if you can come up with maybe 5 of these. You might consider, for example, what's a food that reminds you of your family or someone in your family? Or what's something that makes you feel safe? What's an object that makes you feel safe? Or what's an object that reminds you of home, whatever home looks like to you? What's an object that reminds you of something or someone that inspires you? If you face challenges in your life, what's an object that reminds you of a challenge that you faced? For me, that object would be ramen noodles. There's a story there, but I'm not going to share it now. What's an object that reminds you of a dream or a goal that you have? Some of you mentioned your superpowers earlier. What's an object that would represent or connect to that superpower? Because it might be kind of abstract, listening or reading people. How do you represent that in terms of an object? A couple more. What's an object that, something that makes you laugh or reminds you of someone who makes you laugh? What's an object that reminds you of just something that you love to do? All right, so we could spend more time on this. If you want, you can just Google essence objects exercise, college essay guy, and you'll find the longer version of that exercise. But we started with values, and now we're doing I love, I know, and we're doing essence objects. The purpose of your personal statement, like I mentioned, is to manifest your values in your application. How do you do that? There are a few different ways. And one of the ways, for example, is to just talk about something that you love or you know a lot about, and use that to connect to many different values. So one exercise that I love to do with this is take something like, I've got my blank sheet of paper here. You could take something like food, for example. Let's say you love food, or maybe cooking is your superpower. So you write it at the top of your sheet here. And then you basically just create one of those little, my students call this a jellyfish. And you put all these circles underneath it. And you basically name as many values as you can that connect to food for you. So for me, if I was writing a food essay, I would put family would be one of my values. I would put connection. It's related to family, but I find that I find connection to the earth, connection to my friends, other people through food. Laughter would be another one that I would put in terms of food. Anyway, you can kind of see where that goes. So each one of these could become a different paragraph in my essay, right? And you can do this with anything. You could do this with games. I know a lot about games. You could do this with science. You could do this with, European history, late 19th century European history, right? You can do this with pretty much anything. And the more obscure the topic, the more, unusual, the more, better your chance of standing out. But you could still do something with something common, somewhat common, and stand out. So this is just one way to do it. But I want to take you into this. Let me just show you a quick example essay and show you how something that you love or know a lot about could actually connect to many different sides of you. So I'm going to take you inside. This is my Choose Your Own Adventure essay tool, which I'll tell you more about later. And there are basically, two different styles of essay. One is if you have faced challenges, the narrative structure, which we'll talk about in a minute. But right now we're talking about something like that you know a lot about or that you love. So we're not necessarily talking about challenges. So we're talking about what I call a montage essay. And there are different styles of montage essay. You could write about something that you love or know a lot about. You could use essence objects to help you get to an essay topic. You could use a superpower or skill. So let me show you what I mean. Past students, and this is basically, I put this together after looking at 300 past essays from past students. Here's some examples of what other students have written their personal statements on. The power of language, or rocks, or medieval blacksmithing, a student last year wrote about. And so here's what an essay might look like if he was writing about, I'm going to go to, because I mentioned food, I'm going to do the food example. So here's an essay that written by a student who knew a lot about food. Here's his essay. So since 1941, he says, my family's had an odd tradition. 3 days a week, my great-grandfather, Pop, brought home ribs. After dinner, he'd go around the table inspecting each plate, making sure each rib was stripped down to the bone. If he found one morsel, you couldn't be excused. Pop believed that before you could leave the table, you had to finish your ribs. You hear the metaphor there already? This lesson has stuck with me. Whether I'm staying up until 2 a.m. to figure out the radius of convergence of a power series, that's what I call geeky language, dropping some jargon so we know he knows what he's talking about, or identifying solutions to countless concerns issued by my school district, I strive to finish my ribs. But this is just one of the many lessons food has taught me, and that's kind of the thesis. And so what he's done here is he's kind of created food as the thing at the top of his brainstorm. And now he's connecting it to different things. So in one case, he's connecting it to finishing his ribs. The value there, what would you call that? Persistence, dedication, something like that. But he doesn't say persistence or dedication because those would kind of be cheesy. He uses this kind of like cool metaphor. In the next section of the essay, and I'm not going to read you the whole thing just right now, but he connects to family. He says, to me, eating means celebrating culture, people, life. He celebrated naan, that was his grandmother's life, by eating gefilte fish, which is a stuffed seafood concoction. Oh, he says, in the time since, I've realized gefilte fish is more than just the unfamiliar food tucked away in my great-grandma's fridge. It represents the opportunities that arise from trying new things. You see the little thing, the segue? So, because gefilte fish, he says, is everywhere. In some cases, gefilte fish has meant testing different locations of bins to minimize food waste in a school with no cafeteria. You see how he connected it? This is what I call smuggling in other sides of yourself. So he's taking this food thing, a lesson that he's learned from food, and then he's talking about how did he apply that lesson elsewhere in his life. So keep in mind that whatever topic you choose is not actually your topic. Like, this isn't a food essay. The topic is still the student, right? The author. He's just using food as a device to show these different values. Okay. Another example, researching how biofortification can create an allosteric inhibitor, reducing the release of ethylene. There's his knowledge, science, academic side, thus increasing the shelf life of produce. The lessons I learned through food, back to his main theme, aren't just limited to traditional meals though. He talks in the next paragraph about, selling otter pops at this race. And he talks about the importance of eating your own otter pops, which is like the importance of taking a break. And, whether that's with his teammates in sports, that kind of thing. So my point here is this: your essay is not about the thing here. It's about these things and how they've manifested in your life. And it could be almost about anything. Now, some of the things that I love about this essay, and these are the 4 qualities that I believe that a personal statement can demonstrate. Number 1 is we've got clear values. So he shows determination through the finish your ribs story. There's some nice vulnerable moments, which we didn't really get into just for the sake of time, but there are family notes in the tablecloth. I think that's another really nice quality, which I'll get to in just a minute. He talks about experimenting and trying new things. He talks about the value of resting and taking the time to enjoy the fruits of your labor. And then cooking, in the end, he talks about how, that connects back to family and the impact that he has on the environment, which was a big thing for him as well. So all those values, by the end of your personal statement, I should be able to get a sense of like 4 to 5, at least, of your core values. And how do you do that? By demonstrating. So on his essence objects list, the tablecloth from his family was something that ended up in the essay. The otter pops, were an essence object. They were a tangible thing that helped to manifest his values so that we could see the thing. Because storytelling, personal statement writing is really a visual art form. So how do you manifest those so that we can really start to imagine, what your life looks like, and then you sort of weave and connect those values to it. Insight is the other thing that he does well. He answers the question, so what? I think a great personal statement answers the question, so what, several times. One of his insights is, I understand the world. Whoops, sorry. I need to edit this. I cook to discover myself. There's just a period. This is how I understand the world, period. I cook to discover myself. I eat to learn about the world around me. That's interesting, right? I cook to discover myself. I eat to learn about the world around me. This gives us a sense of why he's interested in cooking after all. Vulnerability. There's a beautiful moment in the paragraph I skipped where he says, it's in the presence of a tablecloth where time freezes and I begin to feel an unfamiliar sense of stability. So there's a little hint that there's been instability in his life. It's where my brother Noah told my dad he loved him after 6 years of not communicating, where mom sat next to dad without a lawyer by their side, and where my family has gathered for every birthday at the same restaurant since I was 4. So he doesn't go into all the details of the divorce. He was actually a child of 3 different divorces, but he basically weaves in that just a little bit in one of the paragraphs. Really nice. And then finally, craft. Craft is just the sense of like, did you work hard on this to revise over several drafts, right? You'll find one of the things he does, he says, you'll find thoughts from my dad in the tablecloth paragraph, but only until 2004, which hints, okay, dad was gone after 2004. And then at the end of the essay, he uses this phrase, I'm hungry, to kind of have a double meaning. So you can kind of see that there's some double meanings here. So this is just one way to write your essay, but these qualities are going to apply across the board. So let's say, and I'm not going to read you this whole essay right now, but let's say you did choose some different essence objects from your list. You could actually use those to talk about different things in your room. Here's a student who wrote about his desk and the desk that he sits at and the objects and the story of their objects. He basically used the object to connect to different values. So in this case, the second paragraph is on his laptop. And then he's got this like stack of books. And then later on, he's got a bead bracelet. It connects to his family. And each one of these connects to a different value. So the laptop shows his curiosity. The book that he chooses from the bookshelf shows his leadership. And then the bead bracelet shows his connection to his family. But all of them connect because they're all objects on his desk. So that's another path. And then you've got, and I'll just give you this one, and then I'm going to shift to a whole different structure. But you've got skills or superpowers, right? Here are some common examples of skills or superpowers that students have written on: listening or mentoring, or meticulousness, attention to detail. And then there are some more unusual superpowers or skills like, beatboxing or fidgeting or, MacGyvering, which is like taking the resources you have and doing the best you have with the resources available. Taste testing, translating. So you can take, again, and the structure here is somewhat similar. This is a student who is her superpower is building and problem solving. And she connects that to a lot of different values: experimentation, commitment, her sense of humor, resourcefulness, adaptability, creativity, leadership. So for the sake of time, I don't have to go through all these essays, but my point here is that there are so many different ways that you can use the different moments in your life to connect to different sides of you. So, it could be a career that's important to you. So you put the career, same brainstorm here. You put the career at the top, and then you brainstorm what are the different values, right, that career has led to, what are the different values that you feel like would serve you in that future career? And then you give us an example for each one. It could be an identity that you've got. I know that I was going to say only 2 different structures. I'm actually giving you like 7 different ones. It could be an identity, a way that you identify. Is it like a cultural identity? How does that connect to different values? Or is it, are there different identities? I am a dancer. I am a leader. I am a, musician. What are these different identities? And you could do a paragraph on each one of those. Another way to do it is a home. What is a home that has been really meaningful to you? Or, that you find flow? It could be in your, in the gym. It could be on stage. It could be in the weight room, and it could be that there's just one home that you use as the essay, or it could be that there are many different kinds of home. Another one, I'll just flash on this one real quick, because I think this one, a lot of students make the mistake of choosing a common extracurricular activity. And if the topic is really common, it's going to be harder to stand out. So here are some common extracurricular activity topics that I wouldn't recommend for your personal statement necessarily, because the problem with these is that so many students are going to be writing on them. Baseball, basketball, Boy Scouts, coding, dance, debate. Like, these are things that I would recommend using for your supplemental essays. Now, if you're like, well, what are supplemental essays? Those are the essays that you'll need to write in addition to your personal statement that are school specific. I'm going to talk more about those tomorrow in 24 hours when we do part 2 of this little webinar series on how to save time in that process, writing all those supplemental essays, because there'll probably be quite a few of them. But I wouldn't recommend these as personal statement topics. And I certainly wouldn't recommend these, which are pretty cliche, the big performance essay where you were nervous to present or nervous to, go up on stage, but you're sweaty, your heart was pounding, but you ended up doing it. Or the big game essay where you won the game or you lost the game, but won in life. Or the sports injury essay, or the mission trip essay where you as someone who has privilege goes to a place where the folks have relative less privilege and you learn a valuable life lesson. Like, I have so much to be grateful for, or people can be poor but still happy, one of those things. So I wouldn't recommend those topics. I would say try to find something else. And there are so many ideas. There's so many topics, so many possibilities that you could choose. And here are 7 different ones. Okay. Having said all that, it could be, I'm just going to go back to the homepage here. It could be that you have a challenge that you faced, or a set of challenges. If so, I recommend what's called the narrative structure. Now, the narrative structure basically involves, I'm going to stop sharing my screen for just a second so you can see me. So the narrative structure is not, it could be woven in with something that you love or know a lot about, but this structure is more like, rather than this is montage, right? What is the thing? How does it connect to all these different values, parts of me? Narrative structure is more like this. I'm going to just split my paper into 3. So this is your essay. Your challenge and the effects are in the first part of your essay. What you did about it is in the next part. And then what you learned is in the third part. And I have a short exercise that's called the feelings and needs exercise, which I'll email out after this, that will allow you to basically start to think about challenges that you faced and see if those challenges could be interesting personal statement, content. Like, could these be essay worthy, as it were? If it's a small challenge and you feel like you're trying to stretch it or trying to push it, I wouldn't recommend it. I'd say try the montage. There's so many different possibilities. But if it's something that's really been a big deal for you, I think it's worth considering it, going through this feelings and needs exercise. Sometimes students ask questions like, well, what about, learning differences or mental health issues? Some of that stuff can be addressed in your additional information section, which again, I'll talk more about tomorrow because it's not related directly to the personal statement. But in short, there's an additional information section in your common application that has 650 words of potential space that you can basically put something like, I was diagnosed with X learning difference in, 10th grade. Here's what I did about it. Another bullet point, and here's what I learned through the experience. And I say this because sometimes students feel like they don't want to be defined by that single story, right? The single story of, oh, I am the student with a learning difference, or I am the student who went through X challenge. You can put those succinctly in your additional information section, or if you have a counselor that you're connected to, your counselor could address that in their letter. And then you can do whatever you want in your personal statement. You can demonstrate through the things that you love, through your essence objects, through your skills or superpowers, the career, any of those other things. You can use that personal statement opportunity to talk about whatever else you want to, okay? Some students will also ask, should I write about COVID? And, we've all had, I would say probably all of us have had some kind of life disruption or challenges related to COVID, but the Common Application has opened up a separate 250 word space where you can write about whatever challenges that have been pandemic related in that section. So I wouldn't recommend putting that in your personal statement. And I've got a whole separate guide, and I'll talk more about it, tomorrow, because it's kind of a separate section on, how do you write that section? What should you put in there? But again, I'm trying to get you to think about freeing up space so that you can figure out, okay, how do I let all the awesomeness of who you are express itself in the personal statement? But if you do end up writing about a challenge, which I think for some students is really right, let me just show you an example essay of what one looks like and a little analysis. And I want to show you how I feel like it still brings in those qualities that I mentioned, those 4 qualities, which I'll recap in just a second. All right, so this is the what had to be done essay. At 6 years old, the student writes, I stood locked away in the restroom. I held tightly to a tube of toothpaste because I'd been sent to brush my teeth to distract me from the commotion. Regardless, I knew what was happening. My dad was being put under arrest for domestic abuse. He'd hurt my mom, physically and mentally, and my brother Jose and I had shared the mental strain. It's what had to be done. So here's a student who went through extraordinary challenges as a kid. And notice this, the tube of toothpaste. This was the first essence object that he listed. And that was this memory that he had of like looking at this toothpaste while this was the moment that he lost his dad. So notice, again, these essence objects can work in not just to a montage essay, like the ones we talked about earlier, but also a narrative potentially, because it's these concrete things that make up the details of our life. So what effect did that have? That's what I want to know. Here's the challenge. What was the effect? Living without a father meant money was tight. Effect. Mom worked 2 jobs. Effect. And my brother and I took care of each other when she worked. So that's another impact. For a brief period of time, our lives slowly started to improve as our soon-to-be stepdad became an integral part of our family. He paid attention to our needs, but our prosperity was short-lived as his chronic alcoholism became more and more recurrent. So there's a little moment where things get better, but then they get worse again. When I was 8, my younger brother Fernando's birth, so we had another little brother, raises the stakes, another challenge. And that made things more complicated. Stepdad slips away, mom keeps working. He and his brother have to pick up the slack. He cooked, Jose cleaned. He says, I dressed Fernando, Jose put him to bed. We did what we had to do. So they became the parents, right? These 2 brothers raising their other little brother. So challenges, effects, and then here was another challenge. The student went through a lot. And if you've been through a lot, what I would say is like, if you can fit it into the first third, great. If you need a little more space, I would say you can go to the midpoint of the essay, which is what this student does. This student was undocumented as well, which led to some other impacts. But there's a turning point midway through the essay. Over time, however, I grew determined to improve the quality of life for my family and myself. So what did you do about it? Well, without a father figure to teach me the things a father could, I became my own teacher, learned how to fix a bike, how to swim, even how to talk to girls. I became resourceful, notice the values, fixing shoes with strips of duct tape, found a job to help pay bills, became as independent as I could to lessen the time and money mom had to spend raising me. See all the values? Resourcefulness, ambition, independence, family. He concludes other things that he did. I'm not going to read the whole thing now just for the sake of time. Lots of details of some of the other things he did. But he says, I'm excited to say there's so much I have yet to do. I haven't danced the tango, solved a Rubik's Cube, explored how perpetual motion might fuel space exploration, or seen the World Trade Center. And I've yet to see the person that Fernando will become. I'll do as much as I can from now on, not because I have to, because I choose to. And that final value, this was his number 1 value, which was autonomy, making choices for himself. That shows the progression in this essay. So one thing that you can learn from this essay, he goes from the starting point, which is like doing what had to be done. It's what had to be done. We did what we had to do, to eventually getting to the point, not because I have to, but because I choose to. And one of the things that you might think about, let me just share my face here for a second, that you might think about if you face challenges is, who was I? You know, what was 1.0 version of me? And then you'll talk about the experiences you went through and then say, okay, and who have I become? Right? And that, in this case, I was somebody who did things that had to be done for other people, but one day I want to be able to do things for myself. Okay, so you can kind of think about your challenge as being the stuff that happened to take you from 1.0 version to up level to 2.0 version. And the exercise, the feelings and needs exercise, which again, for the sake of time, because I want to get to Q&A soon, we'll walk you through the steps of thinking about what was the challenge, how did it impact you, were there any other challenge, and how did those impact you, other challenges? What did you do about it, and what did you learn? There are a few more nuances to that, but I want you to spend time with that exercise. When you get it, if you want to spend 20, 25 minutes, I think that's you might find your topic there if you face challenges. If you're thinking about this right now and you're like, man, I don't feel like I've really faced challenges, it's not really then don't worry about it. Your narrative structure kind of helps students go deep and talk about life-changing experiences. Many students, in fact, you might argue that most students, although that's hard to measure, haven't been through that like life-changing experience, like this student went through. And that montage structure for you, all those other different ways of writing your essay are totally fine and legit. There's also sort of like a cultural bias towards, oh, I feel like I should have faced a challenge or I should be writing it. Let that go. Okay, that's pressure that you're putting on yourself. You can write an awesome essay. Thousands and thousands and thousands of students write awesome essays that are not about challenges every year, and they get into great schools. So that's part of what, that I want to make sure that I say that to you, so that y'all really hear that. Because I think sometimes students read that essay and they're like, oh, I wish I had a story like that. And I'm sure that if that Adrian, the student who wrote that, were to be like, man, well, I don't know if he would say he wished he hadn't gone through those experiences, but, he also he had other ideas for other possible essays. Some of his supplements, which again, we'll talk about tomorrow, were about, a job that he had, about his love of math. So he had these other sides of himself that he was able to bring into the application. They just didn't all end up in his personal statement. He wove in a few details, but okay. So what are the qualities? Let me just get you to those qualities for a second. So the values are so clear. I mentioned some of them. Resourcefulness. Let me just mention the 4 qualities again. Values, insight, which is like, do you answer so what? And this student clearly does. So what? So what did you do? So what did you do? So what are you interested in? He really brings it, forward. And there's some nice surprising moments, some so what moments. There's plenty of vulnerability. With the challenges essay, it's often easier to be vulnerable because you're talking about things that you maybe don't talk to everybody. And then craft, is it clearly organized, clearly structured? Is it clear that he chose these moments? He's got a nice little hook there with this moment, this really arresting moment, so to speak, where he's holding the toothpaste and we kind of like draws us in. And that shows craft. That shows that he really put some energy into this. Okay, so we've talked about, let me just check my agenda. The example essays, 4 qualities of a personal statement. Oh, you know what? This is great. We're doing great on time. So let me share with y'all. I'm going to do just like a 1-minute PSA for this Pay What You Can course that I'm leading. That's coming up in 2 weeks. It's called, as you might guess, How to Write a Personal Statement. And then we're going to get into Q&A. So get your questions ready. So this is like a step-by-step. So if you're wondering, like, how do I get access to all these essays and this tool, it's going to be in this course. Saturday, so this is like, 2 weeks from now, we're going to begin with a big brainstorming session. We're going to kind of pick up where we left off. I shared with you 3 exercises. We've got 4 more that I'm going to share with you. And you're going to have homework assignments to like start writing. And then the next week, I'm going to give the option for some of you to basically submit essays to like an email account. And I'm going to go through and look at sample essays that some of you all are working on. Not everybody, I can't get to everybody, of course, but I'll probably get to like 10 or 15. And we're going to talk about writing, getting started on the process. How do you know if your topic is a good topic or not? We'll play this game called Is This a Good Topic or Not? Where you'll just basically put your topic in the chat box and I'll be like, that's great. Or maybe go to this part of the tool because it's going to work alongside this choose your own adventure tool that I've been showing you. And then writing and revising. How do we make sure that we've set ourselves up for a really good draft? And then up leveling the essay. How do you bring more insight into the essay? How do you make sure the essay flows or not? And then for some of you, you'll get to that point of the process and you'll be like, oh, I need to start over. And then I'll show you exactly, where and how to do that. Then each week I'm going to be like basically, reviewing sample essays. When I ran this course in June, I was able to get to like 50 essays over the course of the course. And then we're going to do like a little, bonus Q&A session. Part 2, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about tomorrow, but I'll just mention it briefly, is not on Saturdays, but on Sundays, I'm going to be talking about the big picture of the rest of your application, your activities list, your additional information section, the Why Us essay, which in some cases, which I'll talk more about tomorrow, can be even more important than the personal statement. Your extracurricular essays, all the other supplements, and then how do you review your whole application? And that's going to happen on Sundays. So my invitation to y'all is let's spend the month together working through these courses. And I'll follow up via email so you can get more information on that. This was kind of a thing that popped in my head last night where I was going to say, for the next 24 hours, I'm going to make an offer that you can pay whatever you want for this course. Whatever you want, you name your price. But of course, the joke is, if you know me, that's always true with my courses, with all the courses that I lead. So these courses are pay what you can. So I don't want finances to be a barrier for anyone. So don't think like, oh, I can't afford this. There's like a suggested cost, but I want you to pay whatever feels comfortable. So That's it. That's my PSA. I think it took 2 minutes instead of 1 minute. But I'd love to open things up for Q&A and just hear from you all. What questions do you have about the personal statement? I know that we're just sort of at the beginning of this process, and we're just maybe having a couple small ideas. But what's popping up for you? Okay. Can I include a narrative in a montage essay to demonstrate a value? Absolutely. That's a great thing. That's I don't want to say that's more advanced, but it is a little bit. But you can include, so let's say you've got a montage essay, which is like talking about family. Well, if you're going to talk about family and connection, you need little stories, right? Examples. So within your montage, yeah, you're going to have mini narratives, but don't tell the whole story. Give us like a specific example. So you're going to want to keep them super short. So they're kind of like mini stories. So your whole essay could be mini narratives with the larger theme of whatever this is. Science, asking difficult questions, whatever it is here, right? And or you can kind of flip it. Sometimes students will do a narrative essay where they're talking about challenges, and then they're talking about what they did about it. And within what they did about it to overcome the challenge, this might be a little montage where you develop different values and skills and qualities. Okay. But I want you to think about them as two separate things, because largely speaking, if you're writing a narrative, it's about a challenge that you're trying to overcome. And if you're writing about a montage, you're writing about lots of different things. And the thing that connects them is not a challenge, but it's whatever this topic is, the theme that you've chosen. Okay. What's the main difference between personal statements and supplemental essays? So Danielle, the personal statement is going to go to like all the, like say you're applying to private schools, it's going to go to all those schools or many of those schools. Whereas a supplemental essay will be school specific. So like, let's say you're applying to USC, they want to know, why do you want to apply to USC? And that supplemental essay will just go to USC. Okay. How do I structure an essay where I had different events in my life that shaped the philosophy of my life? I guess they look scattered and all over the place. So there are two ways. One is you'll need to find, Shirjan, a theme that sort of connects these things. Now, it could be something as simple as what you've just said, where maybe the opening theme is like different events that have shaped my life philosophy. So you could start your essay with, this is what we're going to be doing on the course, by the way, is like you could start your essay with like, there have been 3 moments that have shaped my life in, incredible ways or in very important ways. Moment 1, the thing that happened with my sister, or moment 1, what happened outside, classroom 106, and then give us that moment and how it shaped you. Next moment and how it shaped you. So the focusing lens, which is to say the thing that you're using as a theme, is the thing that connects them all. Now, if you, I would say do that as a exercise to see how that goes. And then what you might start to find is there are certain themes or patterns that are emerging. And then it could be that theme or pattern starts to take the top spot where you're like, this is actually a little bit more like the thing that I want to write about, or the thing that I want to talk about or focus on. How many words should it be? 650 words, Eduardo, is what the Common App asks for. It might be somewhere between 500 to 650. The 4 values, again, thanks for asking, Emma. The 4 qualities of a great personal statement: values, insight, vulnerability, and craft. How do you avoid talking too much about struggle and not about overcoming it? Mali, yes, thank you for this question. So for your first draft, don't worry about it. Write about the struggle, because if you've never written about this before, it's going to take you some time to figure out and get your thoughts on the page. Ultimately, what I want you to do over the course of the next few weeks is I want you to be able to see if you can squish the most important parts of the struggle and how they impacted you. So you can almost think of the struggle, I'm going to put C for challenges and E for the effects. Make sure that the challenges are spoken, briefly, and then how they impacted you is in there. If you need a little more space, yeah, you can kind of squeeze this down, but challenges and effects, okay? Make sure that's early on in your essay so that we get a sense, because colleges, they care about your challenges in so much as they want to know, what did you do about it and what did you learn from the experience? If your whole essay is all about the challenges, then all they do is they feel like bad. Wow, I'm really sorry you had to go through that. Life isn't fair. That sucks. But you don't really get to do the thing of the college essay, which is to demonstrate the values, the skills, the qualities, the interests that you're going to bring with you to the college campus. So give yourself permission, Mali, in those early drafts to just like write about, just what the challenge was. And then don't worry about the word limit, as you're thinking about this. One of the things that I talk about in the tool is like, how do you create an outline that basically allows you to, expand on the what I did about it, what I learned section of it. Is origami a common topic? Somewhat common. Like I would say that It's not incredibly common, but I would say like in the last couple of years, I've probably seen, 5 or 10 students, write about origami. So it's not super common. Great question, Adrian. If I had many challenges, how can I choose one to be my main one? So that student was similar, also coincidentally named Adrian. He decided to choose the one that was like the inciting incident, when he felt like the challenges really began. And then he kind of made, he was unsure if he was going to put the undocumented stuff in there or not. He basically made it a separate paragraph. So one thing you could do, simple thing, Adrian, is like think about, were there 2 phases to the challenges? So phase 1 for Adrian, it was like when he lost his dad, when his dad was arrested. And phase 2, stuff related to like growing up with his stepdad. And then he actually had a phase 3, which was like undocumented stuff. So just put them in separate paragraphs, I would say. But again, by the midpoint of the essay, you want to kind of shift it so that you get into what you did about it, what you learned. Ryan says, if I want to make my largest montage essay about individualism, should I incorporate other values throughout the montage? Absolutely. That sounds like a great idea. I mean, you're going to want to bring in other values besides individualism anyway. And you might find that individualism manifests itself, because individualism might be a little bit of a generic, not generic, but kind of general topic. Like individualism is important to me. You might find some kind of phrase that, says that in a little bit more specific way. Someone asked, do the essays need titles? Not necessarily. I find the title is good if you can provide like a cool hook for the personal statement, but you don't need a title. Someone's asking, what about immigration challenges? That's a common challenge. And so one of the things to think about is, when you go through the feelings and needs exercise, which again, I'm going to follow up with, when you go through that exercise, ask yourself, were there specific things that I did about it and learned that might help set me apart from other students? Because the challenge, or were there ways that impacted me that might be different from the way immigration impacted other students? Because it's one of the most common topics, I would say, among probably like 20 or so that I could name. But I would say in terms of challenges, it's a pretty common challenge. Devin, using your college essay essentials book and your free online tools, would that cover all the material in your online course? It wouldn't, Devin, because the main difference is this tool, the Choose Your Own Adventure tool, which is basically the up-leveled version of the book. You can definitely do great using the free resources, but also the course is free, basically, because it's pay what you can. So it's like whatever you need, and I'm going to walk you through on a week-by-week basis. So if you have the energy to click the button, I would say do it, because it's not going to literally cost you anything. And it's going to be, I think that the Choose Your Own Adventure tool is a better organized way. I wrote the College Essay Essentials book in 2016, so like 4 years ago, but I think this is better, just to be honest with you. What advice do you have for getting over writer's block? Having a clear plan and great brainstorming exercises, because I find that once you're inspired to write and once you have an outline, that oftentimes takes care of it. Usually, I think students are experiencing writer's block when a couple things. One is like, if they don't know what they're writing about, right? Which is why I think inspiration and planning can help with that. But oftentimes with perfectionism, I was talking to a student actually earlier today about his perfectionism. And he was like, yeah, I just want to get it right. And I'm like, you don't have to get it perfect. Write a bad first draft. Give yourself permission to give yourself a C, or at least a B. Sometimes students get blocked up by that. So do it wrong. You don't have to do it perfectly. So those are the 2 of the things. But if there's other things that and also asking yourself, like, what is that really about for me? Is it, if it's not about not knowing what to write about, like, why do I procrastinate? Is this something that happens elsewhere in your life, or is it just with this? And so asking yourself that deeper question of like, because that could be just useful for life. Like, what is that really about for me? What is procrastination about? Am I trying to be perfect? Am I trying to control something? Sometimes I procrastinate things when I'm like either overwhelmed, with it could just be that you're overwhelmed too. You've probably got a lot. You're probably going back to online school or in-person school, which is stressful too. And you're probably doing a lot of things. So, give yourself 1 action item for the week or 2 action items for the week in terms of your chunk things, make them smaller. That's what I got. I'm just throwing things at you. Is it different for international schools? So Madeline, yeah, if you're applying to schools overseas, that's a whole different thing. If you're applying to the UK schools, for example, just Google UCAS College Essay Guide, and I've got a whole separate guide for how to write those kinds of personal statements. It's a different style. Can you take bits of your personal essay and plug it into the supplemental essays? You could, Andrew, but you want to kind of not repeat yourself, Okay, so I would say if you mention a thing, yeah, you could expand on it in a full essay. That could totally work. But you want to make sure that it doesn't end up being redundant. You talked about not doing your personal essay about having a condition. However, I was diagnosed with ASD and having that really shape me as a person. Does your advice still apply? I mean, what I would say, Mira, is like if you want to write about that and you feel like this is your deepest story, then go for it. Go for it. I don't think you shouldn't write about it. What I was saying is like, it's possible if you want to put potentially a brief description in your additional information section so that they get that story. Because it sounds like it's an important part of you and I want them to get that part of you. But you don't have to make it your whole personal statement. And I say that because, like, let's say you've got something like you love animals and animals connect all these different sides of you. You wouldn't probably put that in your additional information section. It would be easier to put that in your personal statement to show all the different sides of you and then be like, oh, and here was this condition and what I did about it and how it shaped me. I know I said that it was just like a few bullet points, but if you want to expand that to like a paragraph, I think that's a great thing to do. So again, I think it's a good idea to communicate to them, but just the question is, where in your application do you want to do that? Where on the website were the essays you read? So Lauren, those essays are all inside the Choose Your Own Adventure tool that working through on the course, which again is basically free. Let's see. Someone's asking, do I have free one-on-one essay counseling for low-income students? I do. If you go to collegeessayguide.com/matchlighters, there is a program that right now we've had to close it because it's full because we had more applicants than we had counselors. But just keep an eye on that, and I'm hoping that we can reopen that as soon as we get the students who've already applied matched. So just keep an eye on that link, collegeessayguide.com/matchlighters. If challenges and effects are 1/3 of the essay, what's the 2/3 of the challenge essay? So challenges and effects, what I did about it, what I learned through the experience. Is there a way to tastefully write about a mission trip? It's really hard. I would say explore other topics. Or so two things. One, can you make it, so if it's a montage, can you find some other topic that you're writing about and weave in whatever you learned on the mission trip to one paragraph and give us an insight that might be something that another student might necessarily come up with on theirs. So I would say, yes, potentially, but I would make it not the whole essay. I would just kind of weave it into like a part of it and give us an insight that helps it, be different. And yeah, that's the short answer. How common, and let me actually, I want to expand on that because be different is not very, so ask yourself, what are the values that would generally be focused on in a mission trip essay? And then choose another value for your insight. How common is writing about LGBTQ experiences for the personal essay? Not super common. It's a little bit more common than Origami, but not as common as an immigrant story. And so for more on that, Nico, just Google LGBTQ college essay guy, and you'll see 10 example essays, really good ones from students who wrote about it and who were at all different stages of their journey. Some students hadn't come out yet, and some students had come out when they were younger and had become advocates. And so there are lots of great ways to do that. There's also a big list of resources, 50+ resources for students who are looking for, schools that have safe spaces that are, so check that out. LGBTQ college essay guy. Is the concept how a phrase of a poem changed my life a valid essay idea? It might be hard. So if the phrase of the poem could connect to many different values, then maybe. But it could be that there were different, phrases of different poems. So could it be that poems, and phrases of poems is the focusing lens, and then different phrases connect to different sides of you? That could be cool. Good question. Haley asks, you mentioned writing about mental illnesses, learning disabilities. Will talking about having a learning disability change your chances of getting it? It shouldn't, Haley. That would be awful. Learning disability, writing about it in a factual way. I haven't in my years seen a student writing about, and I don't know what your particular learning difference is or learning disability, but things like ADHD, I could name a bunch of them, but these things are not going to, affect your chances. Now, writing about mental health is a tricky one. If it's a mental health issue, I would say talk to your counselor, because it could be something that raises a yellow flag for schools. They want to make sure that they've got the resources to really support you. And so that's a question to have, a conversation to have with your counselor. It's not something that I would make a recommendation about. Just without knowing you or anybody who's considering writing about mental health. I would say, though, I would err on the side of brainstorming lots of different possibilities, because again, you want to make sure that you're not sort of defined by the single story. Like if you write about mental health as your main personal statement thing, do you become the student with the mental health issues? Maybe, and what I find oftentimes is students focus on that when they haven't spent time just brainstorming for an hour other possible topics. So I want to make sure that you spend that time doing that before you commit to, I'm not saying this is you, but I'm speaking to anybody who's considering committing to mental health as their main personal statement topic. Would an artist statement be structured different from a personal essay? Yeah, it would be a little bit different, Melissa. Is being a teaching assistant very common? It's pretty common, Wing. Yeah, I think so. How common is writing about books or reading? Anish, it's somewhat common, but I mean, I'm a sucker for a good books essay. So, I think some topics carry sort of like academic weight, and I think books and reading certainly would. So if you wrote about different books that you've read and how they've, shaped and, different values and made different important things in your life, I think that could be awesome. All right, we're almost at time, so a couple more questions. How can I know if my essay topic is too abstract or weird? Ask folks, Jillian. What is your topic? I mean, I'm curious. I wish you'd put it in the chat here because then I could say weird topics are actually often interesting. I'd love to hear, what some of your weird topic ideas are. So I'd say the weirder, oftentimes the better, Now, yeah, I mean, the main thing is this. Here's a good answer to your question is, can you connect your weird topic to different sides of you, different values? And if you can, it could be that one is good. Like medieval blacksmithing, the student was able to connect it to many different, sides of him. Someone's asking, where's the link for registering for the Pay What You Can? Just scroll all the way down. It's at the very bottom of the thing. I'll follow up with this very shortly with links. I hope to connect with some of you on the course, but I hope to see y'all tomorrow. In 23 hours, I'm going to be doing part 2. We're going to be talking about not just the personal statement, but all the other elements of the application, the Common App in particular. But this will apply to the Coalition app. Yeah, I hope to see you. And I'll take more questions then. Sorry I didn't get to everyone's questions, but yeah, I'll connect with y'all soon. And yeah, see you tomorrow. That's all. Bye.